Hi everyone, welcome back to another edition of videos, and today's video I'm going to show you another one of my daily games on the chess.com daily chess championships that are currently going on. So this particular one was another interesting game. My opponent, he was a lot lower rated than I was, but there was still some interesting points in the game where things could have swung either way. So the game started with the move e4, c5 was played, entering a Sicilian, knight to f3, c6, d4 and e6 was played, and at this point you probably be tempted to play the move knight to c3 as this enters into a sort of mainline Franco-Sicilian, and I think a move that makes a little bit of sense. The problem though, sometimes what I find myself doing when I'm playing these daily games is I often like to go into the opening book as much as I can, as I want to try and know the mainline positions. So here, actually at this point, my opponent is offering me to go into a transposition back into the main line with the Franco-Sicilian. And I guess from a practical sense, it does allow me to practice the main lines more. But from an objective standpoint, I think it's really important to always try and look for the best moves. So here, the move that I should have played here was d5, a bit of an odd spanner in the works for black, as his attempts to transpose are no longer there. And it's a bit difficult for black to play here. How does he, how does he continue here? His knight's under attack. Where does he move it to? Does he capture with this pawn? There's lots of things going on that, lots of questions that black needs to answer himself. Now, it's interesting here that the computer recommends the move knight to a5. And it's not a great looking move, but you'll see why this is the only good move, as the alternatives are even worse. So with this knight coming to a5, it's obviously a little bit offside here. It's on the rim, it's dim. It's not really participating in the game like it should be. It's also going to take a bit of time to maneuver back into the position. You might have to play moves like b7. The knight has to maybe reroute its way to d6 at some point, which does take quite a bit of time to do. Meanwhile, white's got good control of the centre. He's going to get ahead in development a bit more in this position. Nice space, so it should be very, very good here for him. But going back, so if let's first have a look at what happens after the pawn captures, which looks like an obvious move. After pawn captures back again, computer shouting, go to a5. The reality point is there's not much anything better for black here. He could actually even maybe just have to play back to b8 actually in this position, which looks terrible. But let's have a look at what happens if it goes to e7. This is probably the move that you were thinking of. What's wrong with this move? I'm attacking the pawn. What's going on? The problem is after d6, it looks really bad for black, as now, well, this knight, if he came to f5 looking to try and gang up on this pawn on d6, white has a fantastic move here, queen to e2. And notice that this king has got nowhere it can go to. He can't move out of the check. So he has to block the check. And unfortunately, by blocking the check, he's going to have to lose one of these minor pieces. He doesn't want to lose the queen, of course, but it's going to be a pretty bad position. White should be able to have a good edge in this game. So going back, so instead of all this, let's just say the knight moves to e7 first. So it ignores the capture, just goes straight to here. Now again, d6 can be played here. And this line I've actually really quite liked, because after knight to c6, going back to a sort of semi-natural looking square, e5 can be played. And, well, this looks horrible for black. How does he develop his pieces? His kingside pieces, they're not going to get in the game. The king's not going to castle for a very, very long time. So really, the strategy here for white will be is to try and enjoy the space advantage as long as possible, and just keep reacting to any attempts at counterplay here. So just an example, if let's say black played a6 here, trying to push out with b5, a sort of typical move in most Sicilians, the move a4 I think is really good. And actually it's very, very difficult for black to achieve any counterplay. It actually recommends going for moves like f6 here, which I think is a sign of desperation if you're having to use the f6 break to try and get back into this game. So yeah, those are some of the things that could have happened. Obviously it didn't, but I just thought it was interesting. You know, sometimes don't. I guess if there's a big lesson from this game, is don't just go blindly following the opening book on chess.com. Try and find the most objective looking moves. So anyway, we have a transposition anyway to a normal Franco-Sicilian after knight to c3, and d5 was played. It was a bit of an odd move. As after e takes d5, e takes d4, we've got a weird looking French exchange Tarrasch type thing. And I guess the problem for black really is at any points I can capture this pawn, and that leaves him with this isolated pawn that can potentially become a weakness. It can be a really good asset in black's position, but I think it can also be a bit of a weakness that I can go after throughout the game. Bishop to b5 was played, a6. I took off this knight. Black is left with some really sad-looking pawns now. I castled here, and the move c4 was played. A very odd move. Didn't really quite understand it, as I think the problem with it for black is it now releases all the promising tension from the position. In actual fact, with this pawn moving, he's just created loads of weak squares that I can go after. So, for example, this the c6 pawn has become even weaker. I can jump my knight into this c5 square at some point in the future. So there's lots of problems, and as some of the pawns start to come off, they're going to just become weaker and weaker the further they go into the position. So yeah, I didn't really understand that. I think it released all the tension really in the position. A better move here would have probably been bishop to d6, after which I could then take off here. But there's always a problem for black here. I have to play knight to a5, which is quite an interesting move, hitting the bishop. Bishop's got no real good square it can go to. Bishop to a7 to sort of maintain its scope along this diagonal. I can play queen to e2. And there's a bit of a problem for white here in this sort of continuation. Black is saddled with these poor-looking hanging pawns for the rest of the game. He's got this isolated pawn on a6. So really, my sort of strategy here would be to try and aim for an endgame and threaten, these points that I've pointed out at all points, and I should have a very, very good game. So going back to the actual game, so c4 was played. I put my knight onto e5. I actually really like the move rook to e1 first, but knight to e5 I think is also good. Now hitting this c6 pawn, despite the little dubious question marks on it. Queen to c7, so now defending this pawn. I put my rook onto e1. So now I've already got some threats of some discovered attacks on the black king. The bishop came to e6, now blocking those potential checks. I put my bishop to f4. Again, doesn't really like it, the computer, for the next few moves. I thought this looked quite nice. I've now got this potential tactic along here as well, hitting both the queen and then the rook as well. But after bishop to d6 is a good block of this. I've no longer got that threat anymore. Queen comes to f3. And, it's interesting. At this point, black's position is not too woeful. It's actually only giving me a very tiny edge in this position. His development has been very solid now. He's got his pieces to actually relatively good squares. And, in fairness, if you can put his knight to e7 and castle, he should have a very, very good position. He's caught up in developments. He's developed very solidly. It should be absolutely fine. The problem here now is that black plays a bit of a blunder here. He plays the move f6. And, it's a bit of a bad blunder as well. The f-pawn was actually defending this bishop on e6. So notice, this rook, all these tactics along here. So now I captured on c6, after which the queen captured back. Black's position just totally collapses here. After rook captures with check, he has to react to this. His rook king comes to f7. I can take on d6. I'm now threatening this queen. This pawn's going to fall in a minute. My pieces are really working well together here. His queen came to b7 to get out of the check, but now after this point, I just decided I just wanted to consolidate my advantage here now. I didn't think I needed to be too fancy here. So I captured here with my queen. The obvious problem now is it forks both the king and the queen. Black would be forced to capture the queen, in which case I'm just clearly up 5 points in material. This should be an easy, relatively easy game to now win. So at this point, my opponent actually resigned here. There's not really much point to go any further in this game. So as I say, a very interesting game. I think there was a couple points earlier on where I could have had a very good edge very quickly. I think it was interesting at that point later in the position here. That black's position not looking too bad. Is if you're just playing normal, good-looking moves, sometimes your position can really improve quite quickly, and it doesn't look too bad anymore. But in any case, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope there were some interesting lessons for you guys as well. But otherwise, I'll see you soon, and I'll have a look at some more of my daily games very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.